Welcome to another episode of the CarryTrainer Higher Line podcast. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Higher Line podcast. I've got a friend of mine here, Eric Frohardt, with a D at the end, DT. It's not no D because it's easy to misspell. I'm going to let him tell you about him because I don't know what he's allowed to talk about, what he's not allowed to talk about, and I don't want to have him be like, you got to cut that out. So who are you?
Well, thanks, Mick. My name's Eric Frohardt. I am the Director of Education and Training at the Nra. And let's see, before that, I did a few different things, including was in the military. And
we'll go to that in a minute. You were a kettlebell swinger?
I did actually run a company called Strongfirst. And it's a strength and conditioning education company founded. It's a guy named Pavel Satsulin, who is he's the Russian guy who introduced kettlebells to the West. You see kettlebells in all these gyms right now, and it's really because of him. And there's a couple of different, organizations that do kind of kettlebell instructor certifications and kettlebell student classes. And I worked for him at a company he founded called Strongfirst for, I think, right at 3 years. And okay. I had always been interested in fitness and strength. And I really, when I was in the military, I had, right around the time I was bored. If you remember back in the day, there was kind of a bodybuilder kind of culture. You'd have one day of back and buys and one day of chest and tries, and then leg kind of lifting, training muscles and kind of isolation, I suppose. Mm-hmm. It was around the time, CrossFit and all that was getting bigger. And I saw a buddy, this guy who would ended up being a real close friend of mine, swinging some kettlebells in a gym. And I looked at him and I was like, "You're going to hurt your back, dude. You better stop that." And he got me into it. And I noticed, it was 04 or 05, that I could just, do my strength and my cardio at one time. And it was real cool. And I felt like I moved better. I felt like I stayed in really good shape. I could work out at home without going into the gym. And of course, ended up traveling with them on deployments. Some places we didn't have very good gym conditions, but I always had my kettlebell with me. And
you could always bring a kettlebell.
Yeah. I was very shocked by it. I think I tested myself, not to get all fitnessy on your gun podcast, but
this is not a gun podcast at all.
Okay. I tested myself before one deployment, and I tested my deadlift and my bench press, my max deadlift, the max reps with body weight bench, a 5 mile run, and pull-ups, and one other thing. I forget what it was, just to have kind of a baseline. Mm-hmm. And I went on that would have been a shorter deployment. Did this program for probably 90 days. All I did was kettlebell swings and kettlebell clean and press. And I did that 3 days a week for the length of this deployment.
What are these 20, 30 minute workouts?
If somewhere, the kettlebell swings, got harder and harder, but sometimes 20, sometimes 40, not an hour. Anyway, I felt great, and because I'd always felt great doing this kind of training, but I wanted something that was, objective, not subjective. Feeling good and feeling like you're moving around well with body armor, that is great, but I wanted hard data.
Yeah, you wanted some metrics you could attach to.
Absolutely. if I'm comparing holsters, I'm going to have, a shot timer. How quick can I take, one shot from concealment or something like that? So hard data, right? So I do this, I do this kind of my own modified PT test, and then I go on this whole deployment, and all I do 3 days a week, there's an easy day, a medium day, and a hard day. All I did was two exercises, the 2-arm kettlebell swing and the kettlebell clean and press. And this was in one of Pavel's books back then at the time. And after doing that, I came home and tested myself. Didn't run once in that whole period of time, and my running maintained. It didn't get better, but it maintained. My deadlift shot through the roof. Like I pulled, I think, like 450. At that time, it was 2.5 times my body weight. And my bench press, having not done a bench press for a period of time, it didn't get better, but it stayed the exact same. And my max reps pull-ups went up, and like I said, my run was good. And before that deployment, I really couldn't do, remember the muscle ups, the rings? Couldn't do those. And then after that deployment, I came home.
What do you mean remember them? I got rings right there.
Well, I don't do them anymore. I mean, I have some wear and tear on the shoulders, but
yeah, I don't do them either. But I do have rings.
I have rings. I can do pull-ups on them and dips on them, but muscle ups are not for me. Anyway, I could all of a sudden do like 3 or 4 muscle ups. So
that's cool.
There's in all of his books, Pavel talks about the what the heck effect, right? What the hell effect, and the kettlebell just has that, right? Like I shouldn't be able to run any better, but for whatever reason, it maintains your cardio, and it builds obviously your functional your
How heavy a kettlebell was it that you were taking with you?
On that particular deployment, I was using a 24 kilogram or roughly 53 pound kettlebell, and I'm now I use, I'll either use that one or I have a 32 kilogram kettlebell. I'm doing a different program now, but same sort of thing. Just
so 32 is like 70 pounds or something like that.
Yeah, it's like 72 pounds or something like that.
2.2 pounds per kilo, I think.
Yeah, I don't know the math, but yeah, I think that sounds right. Anyway, and then just fast forward, I ended up, did some mountaineering trips and some.
Hey, you've been up Denali and any other notable peaks?
Climbed Aconcagua down in
really?
Argentina. And
yeah, that's a big boy.
I did a big wall, El Capitan.
You went up El Cap?
Yeah, and I really just got in shape for all this. Or between deployments were not easy on the body, and those.
Let's change gears for a second. We'll come back to El Cap. So you were in the United States Navy. What'd you do in the Navy?
I was a SEAL. I was in for right at nearly 12 years, and I got medically retired. And obviously,
sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I got a lot of awesome training along the way. Diving, parachuting, demolition, fighting, tactical driving. I always, kind of gravitated back to the gun. Whether it was just going to a shooting school or being a trained sniper or something like that. I just really enjoyed shooting, and later I would learn I enjoyed teaching people to shoot. But I did multiple combat tours. My first deployment happened like 2 weeks before 9/11, and we were planning on kind of having a cakewalk of a deployment, just going to Australia and then Thailand and Philippines and all that kind of deal. And then 9/11 happened, and it kind of changed everything. And then, every deployment I've done has been kind of post 9/11, I guess, and ended up getting medically retired at technically the beginning of 2010. So
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's been a little bit. You used to be an out now? Totally
Yeah.
normal?
10 years. Yeah. Time is really, time's really flown. So that time marches on, and that community, they rapidly replace you.
Yeah.
So,
and if memory serves, talking to you, you weren't just vanilla SEAL, as I hear people describe SEALs. You were special.
well, I don't, yeah.
You wouldn't call yourself special.
No, I'm not special. I'm just another SEAL. So
you are special. You are special. I think anybody listening, especially just thus far, would say you're special. So you spent a bunch of time doing that, but when you got out, you still found time to go climb mountains.
Well, I actually I was a lead climber when I was in. So when I climbed Denali and Aconcagua and El Cap and these other things, that was military lead climber training.
No way.
As a taxpayer, I thank you for those climbing trips.
I don't know how many guys go up El Cap every year, but I wonder how many of them are getting paid by the government to do it. That's pretty cool. My brother works out in Yosemite every August as a climber.
Right.
So that's I'm fairly familiar with it. That's
pretty legit.
Intense.
It's pretty legit. I think I've checked the box on big wall climbing, meaning I don't believe I'm going to do that again. We kind of have.
Is that a couple thousand?
Yeah, I think it's like 2,000. It depends. It's kind of at a gradient. Like it's higher on here, and ours we didn't climb the nose or the very front of it. We climbed. It's called the Tangerine Trip, and we have in the SEAL community. Oftentimes there's a very steep learning curve. So here's how it went for me. I had never climbed rock in my life. Okay. And I showed up at a new SEAL team, and it would have been 2005. My team leader looked at me and the other new guy into our, brand new into this squadron. And the other guy was bigger and, thicker guy. And he looked at him and he said, all right, you're going to be the breacher, which is, typically happens. The big guy becomes a breacher because they got to carry lots of stuff. And the little guy, or, I'm not that little, but I was, I guess scrawny compared to him. He's like, how many pull-ups can you do? And I was like, I don't know, like 30 something. And he's like, you're the lead climber. And I've never climbed in my life. And so I get 4 days of climbing in Las Vegas on a trip where we climbed out at Red Rocks, and I got to climb, with Dan Gerberdine and Scott Cosgrove and just some amazing climbing guides. Did that in Vegas. And then we did another 4 days of bigger roots, bigger rock in Australia. And there was, a lot of time passed between these trips, like a full deployment. And then that was all a workup because there's a buddy of mine named Heath who ended up dying. But he was like on fire for us to climb El Cap. And I was like, man, that seems insane. Long story.
So you weren't like my brother and his homies live for that stuff.
No, I won't be doing that again. But I climbed. Yeah, so basically, I got 8 days of rock climbing in my life,
and one of those 8 days was on the gnarliest wall in the world.
No, 8 days. So 4 days in Vegas, 4 days on Mount Arapiles, I think it was, in Australia. Day number 9 is my first day on El Cap. Jeez. So we did a day of. It might have been 2 days of just practicing aid climbing, checking our anchors and building. You had to build systems like hull systems. Mm-hmm. And, it was guided. We had guides, but we didn't just let them, they didn't lead all the pitches and we just, used Jumars and ascended. Like we led most of the pitches. There's I think on our route, there was one or two pitches that were well above, they're way above our pay grade.
Did anybody take a swing on that? Anybody come off the wall? And
yeah, a couple guys took a little whipper, and I did. Like I said, so I got 8 days on 2 different, walls, and then the next 2 times I climbed were the first kind of practice climbs on El Cap. And then on day number 11 is, we're sending it up the Tangerine Trip on El Cap. And I'll never forget that first night. I'm not sure how high we were in the air. It was, maybe it was over 600 feet. And I'm building a portaledge and hooking it to the wall, sleeping more than 600 feet off the ground. And it was greater than vertical right there because there was like an overhang. Yeah. So my portaledge was 6 foot away from the wall, just swinging in the
dangling like a bat.
And I was like, "This is absurd." And it took us,
How'd you sleep?
3 days. I was tired, so I slept fine. They offered Ambien, and I'm like, "No way! I'm not. I have to be 100% on." Mm-hmm. I didn't want to have Ambien, and if I take Ambien, I can't even figure out my iPad. So, I wouldn't take Ambien in a place of consequence.
Did you see that movie last year, the story about Alex Honnold that free climbed it?
So absurd. Like the idea when you're on that wall and you're just like, if you just hand your buddy a water bottle, like you grab it so carefully because, there's 1,500 foot below you or whatever. And you're just scared. But the funny thing is when we finished, and it took us, so we summited on the 3rd day. We spent 2 nights on the side of that wall. And then on the 3rd day we finished, and we spent the 3rd night on the top. And then, we rappel off the backside and come around. We're walking down the street and back past the meadow. And I didn't know it because, like I said, I wasn't a climbing nerd, but there was a couple of climbing nerds in our group. And they're like, "You see that guy over there?" And Alex Honnold was in the meadow looking up at El Cap, younger Alex Honnold, and he was already pretty famous for some other climbing pursuits. Yeah. So, I guess that's our connection, right?
That's cool. That's cool.
I wouldn't even, back then, I wouldn't even have known who that was.
I probably wouldn't have either. My brothers introduced me to so many people in that community that I would never have anything to do with. I do a little stuff locally, there's a couple places in Wisconsin that's got some nice climbing, but I don't live for that stuff either. I like to know how to tie knots and not die, but it's not my jam. So let's go to
pretty scary.
So you did your time in the service. You got out. You ran a gun range.
Yeah,
a big one.
Yeah, I moved to Denver. We did some security consulting, and Denver wasn't the place for security consulting, kind of like a Miami, a New York, or an LA might have been. And it was tough business. And I didn't really know, we didn't know what we were doing, but we did meet a lot of people while doing that. And along the way, we met somebody who became an investor in a gun range. So we found we were trying to train him and some of our clients on an example, like drawing from the holster and rapid fire was not allowed at the ranges that we went to. And I was like, "What do you mean? What do you mean?" They're like, "Oh, you can't shoot more than 1 shot every 2 seconds." And I was like, "Well, that's not realistic at all. How's a guy going to learn how to manage recoil?" And the guy just looked at me like, and then I was like, "Well, can we draw the holster?" And he's like, "No, we don't allow that here." We went to another range and they wouldn't let us draw out of the holster. I'm like, I told the client, I'm like, "Man, if someone had a good range where they let people safely do real stuff, train how you fight, that would be pretty good." and we found an old range. We found a range that was built like in the 70s. It had pretty bad ventilation and needed some new, some fixing to the bullet traps. And, it was a failing business. This was before everyone thought it was a good idea to own a gun range. So it was not doing so well. And they put the company for sale. We raised some money. We bought it. We shut it down. We did all the work on the inside. Obviously, we had contractors fix the ventilation, like a specific gun range ventilation, and then fix the bullet traps. But we did all the painting. I did a bunch of the electric and, replumbed the toilet. I mean, we did all of it. And then we closed in December and opened it in like middle of April. And we just reopened with a couple of lanes. And then we, once our inventory came in, we opened the retail, and then we started doing training. And then it sort of took off from there. And so I did that from about 2010 to 2014. So I did that for, 4 years solid. And at that time, I stepped down from the day-to-day to go run the fitness company. So I stepped down from the day-to-day at the gun range, partially, two former Navy SEALs running a retail size gun range. It didn't need, sometimes a boat needs one captain, right? So
all the time, a boat needs one captain.
Yeah. And sometimes, a couple of A-type guys don't always, and we get along so great now, but it was a good thing, right? So I stepped down. The timing was great. Pavel had asked if I could help him find a CEO for his new, kettlebell endeavor, and I was like, well, what about me? And I went through the kind of, what is it, the process, the interview process, and ended up doing that so in gun range for 4 years, and then I did that, Strongfirst for 3 years. And that was a lot of fun. I think we had like 3,000 to 4,000 instructors, depending on when you measured it. 40 different countries. We did events around the world, and it's very similar to what I get to do now, in that it's a different industry. It's fitness, but you got a credential, you got this material, you're certifying instructors who are out there. They're out there teaching students. You're not teaching, that many students, but you want them to, use this material and teach students the right way. And it's kind of similar to what we're doing, or what I get to do now at the NRA, right? We have all these different credentials. We have this material and these programs and this student material and all that sort of thing. We have instructors with different credentials, and they're the ones out there, training the students. So, and even at the NRA, technically, we train the training counselors who go certify the instructors or trainers who end up training the students. So it's cool, similar in a lot of ways.
For the listeners, most everybody so this is not a gun podcast by any means. I think I told you that, which kind of lets me know you don't listen to my podcast. Whatever. I don't look at your Facebook pictures of your last hunting trip where you didn't get an elk, but you saw moose. Damn it, I do look at the pictures. I do look at them.
Vicky, I didn't know you had a podcast until you.
No, just keep digging. Keep digging. No, it's okay. It's okay. But the discussions here.
I'm adding it to my subscribe.
The discussions here usually circle around stuff a little bit deeper than just shooting guns and such. So one of the things I wanted to talk about with you, we can talk a little bit about the NRA training program. So they brought you on. That's how you and I met. So anybody that's an NRA instructor, ultimately you're like the top of that pyramid. You're running that you're the captain of that ship, so to speak, in that fleet.
Right.
So the training counselors report to you, your director, directing the curriculums, the training, the way that's all happening out in the field. How many certified NRA instructors are there these days?
So it really depends on the renewal cycles. Like it's always hovering somewhere between 115 and 118,000.
Oh, that's pretty specific.
Yeah, well, and like, but some days there'll be like 110. And
Sure.
if you think about it, if just using round numbers, let's just say it was 100,000, and every month, people expire.
Sure.
And if there's a lag time, let's say, I'm an NRA instructor. Before I was at the NRA, let's say my credential expired and I forgot and I didn't renew it right away, right? So there could be a 2-month or whatever lag time before I renewed or did something like that. So even if 10% of that 100,000 don't renew right away, I mean, that's 10,000 people in,
Right, so population of a small city.
It can look like it went way down.
Yeah.
When in fact they're like, they always email back like a month later or 2 months later, like, I forgot to renew. Can you help me? That sort of thing. So,
what kind of stuff are and is NRA doing to revamp? Because there's a big deal. They brought on instead of what has been the norm in that organization, they brought on a young combat vet. Navy guy to do what's normally been, a guy that's like grown up in the organization, so to speak.
Sure. Well, yeah, and I was sort of hired as a consultant at first. I did that for like 6 months, and then working on some of the handgun and the specific CCW curriculum. And they like.
Yeah, now that I think about it, when we met, you weren't in that position that you're in now.
Yeah, I was just a consultant, and then they kind of liked they liked what I did with that, specific to the training side of that, and they offered me the job of being in charge of education and training. And part of it, there's a couple of things here. Number one, when I had an opportunity to teach a lot of responsibly armed Americans how to shoot and do realistic kind of handgun rifle stuff when I was at Blue Corps. Of course, I got a lot of experience in the military, but it wasn't until I really spent time in the trenches training civilians or citizens. It wasn't until I did that I realized, it's just the principles are the same, but the techniques are different. So I got a lot of chance to do that and build kind of my own way of teaching. And in the military, there was a period of time between when I was on the West Coast and when I was on the East Coast, where I spent about 1.5 years at a training command, teaching CQB and close range marksmanship. So tactical pistol, rifle, and CQB. And while I was doing that, I just kind of refined not only my own shooting, but my ability to teach it. And I went through, it's called getting your MTS, your Master Training Specialist. So I got this credential that allowed me to kind of formulate and write curriculum, which I never thought I'd use that, right? I wanted to get back in the fight. And I was between SEAL teams, and I had to go spend 18 months at this training command, and I was bored of doing it. I didn't want to do it. I never thought it would come in handy. And combining that with my teaching of people at Blue Corps, and then really just rounding that out with the experience of running a strength education company, it really kind of helped me in this role now, whether it's teaching people how to teach it or just making sure it's taught correctly. That made a big difference. So now, of course, it's a lot more folks, anywhere from 110 to, could be 120,000, who knows, somewhere around there. It's quite a bit bigger, but you can also make a bigger impact. So even just, we've made some changes recently to just our basic pistol handbook. And the changes are minute. They're very minimal, but that program touches, hundreds
Millions.
Yeah, it has touched millions for sure. So a small change made on something with that much reach can make a real impact. And similarly, we just launched our, the NRA's first official CCW course.
Yeah.
And that's gonna become our most popular course real soon, as far as like number of people taking it and such. And just making those small changes, though, the NRA is a big, it's an aircraft carrier. It doesn't turn too quickly and it doesn't slow down quickly, but it's got a lot of horsepower. And once you make a small change, you can affect a lot of things. So I love that. I love my job. I love the people that I work with in the building. I love working with the NRA instructors around the United States. And, I just owe it to the members and those instructors to do, to work as hard and just do my best to make the training as good as it can be. And, in a way I'm like, oh man, I kind of feel like I get to serve my country again in a way. So.
Yeah, it's 100%. That's 100% valid. I can say, people listening, some folks don't like the NRA instructor program, having been a part of that program for over a decade. And I try to explain this to folks. They think, well, it should be more tactical or more this or more that. I think a lot of folks that have that interpretation don't understand, like you just said, what a behemoth it is. And to be able to disseminate cohesive information, be it in Maine or Florida or Iowa or Washington, that's a big animal. That instructor group, but then all of the counselors over them, keeping guys in check and keeping paperwork flowing and such. That's a big animal.
It's, if you made, there's lots of changes I want to make. And I'm not a person that, I don't make change just to make change. Like, it should only be valid.
Sure.
There has to be a reason for it. I don't want to be a guy who comes in and says, hey, we're going to change it because, I got to put my stamp on it or whatever. Like, that's kind of BS. I'm more about like only making change when it needs to be made. But the challenge is, even if you make a couple of small changes to one of the courses, and of that 100 and let's just say 115,000 right now, more than 70,000 of those are basic pistol instructors. So let's say we made like 3 or 4 very minimal changes to the pistol program. It's extremely hard to communicate those changes to those current instructors, and it's hard to communicate those changes to the training counselors who then certify those instructors. And we just want to make sure that the material is, the instructors have good material to teach, and it's taught in a consistent, standardized manner, right? And so you got to be careful when you make those changes. They have to be, they have to make sense. But you just don't want to you can't make like 10 changes or 10 very significant changes, because there's no way it will be taught consistently across that wide swath of people.
The other thing I'd add to that, just from a outsider's perspective, is you look at what the dominant goal is. The goal with that program isn't combative in nature. It's teaching people basic fundamental marksmanship with the pistol. You've got so many guys that have their own viewpoints on it, but it's not a hunting program. It's not anything other than a basic manipulation and marksmanship program. You get a lot of folks that get nostalgic about material like that. And like, this is the way we've always done it. This is the way it is. So it's just like in law enforcement or in the military or in other types of organizations where training is involved, that some of it's steeped in tradition, not just what Eric thinks or what Mickey thinks. It's tradition of a lot of people.
Yeah, no, it's definitely steeped in, in tradition. And there are definitely some changes that, that we can make and we have made. And there's certainly more to make. You just got to be careful in the pace at which you make them changes.
Sure.
And again, I don't think you can, especially a guy, kind of an outsider, someone who had, hadn't been at the NRA for 10 plus years and now is a director of, all their training. I can't come in there and just make tons of changes just for the sake of making changes. On the same hand, there's definitely some, I was brought in to make some changes. So
sure.
I do expect me to, no doubt.
And you guys got out there and pulled the audience. You brought in a bunch of various guys with various backgrounds and various knowledge bases to provide input and data and such. So it's not like it's just on your shoulders. Yeah, for sure. And we've got a lot of, I think, we got a lot of great programs. We just want to make sure we have good courses for our students and for our instructors, and make sure those instructors do a good job, teaching it, and then make sure it's taught correctly and safely in a consistent manner, and just kind of keep that whole group aligned along the way. Is that probably your biggest challenge?
It's definitely one of them. Making sure, it's taught in a consistent manner, or just, it's hard enough, Mickey, just to communicate with that many instructors because of, there never was a real, I guess, chain of command, there was never a structure, if that makes sense.
I get what you're saying. I mean, I get the emails from NRA, the guy that's the training counselor I worked under. I get contact by him, but no matter how good people's intentions are, I don't read every freaking email that gets sent to me.
Yeah, and that's part of it, and part of it is there's no real structure to it. Meaning, let's just say there's 100. We'll use 112,000. Doesn't matter. 110 doesn't matter. 1,000 people, and we have a group of people at headquarters, 15, give or take, that are in my division that I run, the education and training division. Lacking a structure, they basically can all call us with their questions. So even if all 15 of us could answer phones, and
7,000 people apiece to deal with,
it's not possible. So what we've kind of done, we've kind of built a structure recently. We have state training counselors and regional training counselors, and it's just going to help us get move information up and down the chain of command. And of course, instructors, regardless of where they are, they can still call headquarters directly, but we're having regular meetings and calls with our regional training counselors. There's 8 different regions, and they are disseminating that information out to their state training counselors. And those state training counselors are, there's, depending on the size of the state, there could be 1 per state, or up to 5 or 6 per state, depending on the number of instructors there. And, that way we have an actual kind of, it's not really a chain of command. It's more like a chain of communication. So
I gotcha. It's good stuff, man. I appreciate you doing it, because a lot of people don't want to step into a role like that. I don't, but you've got the chops to do it. Let's change it up a little bit. One thing I know about you is you like to feed your family meat that you harvest yourself. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, well, when I harvest it, yes, I do enjoy that. There's something about it's kind of it's a mixture of the whole thing, Mickey. Like between, I mean, that's a big part of it to me. Feeding, having game meat is a huge part of it, but the actual hunt itself, especially kind of a backcountry mountain hunt, feels like a very big void. The year or so that you're prepping for it, or the 6 months or whatever it is, at least 3 months, you're procuring your gear, you know where you're hunting, you got your maps, you're starting to plan where you're going to go. You're practicing marksmanship. Obviously, for me, it gives me something to train for. I like to have a specific thing to train for from a fitness standpoint.
And you bow hunt?
Bow hunt. I mostly bow hunt. I'm actually going on an elk rifle hunt next week, so cool. I'll do that too. I'm not like some people are pretty snooty. They'll only go with a bow. I like to hunt. So
you want meat? Yeah.
So
what gun do you hunt elk with?
So I have a 300 Win Mag that the gunsmiths at my last team kind of made for me as a going away present. So
cool.
Pretty special.
Remington?
Yep. Remington 300 Win Mag. Super cool gun. There's a lot of different options out there now, 7mm and 300 short mag and all that sort of thing. But when I was still a sniper, like my 300 Win Mag was my favorite sniper rifle. So I feel very, very confident hunting with this thing. So
cool. So you're going out, you're going to take your gun.
Yeah.
You're going to hopefully get yourself some meat on that trip.
Hopefully this time, yep. Hunting elk with a bow on an over-the-counter tag in Colorado is between an 8 and a 10% success rate situation.
Still not too bad when you think about it.
It's a tough hunt. It's a really tough hunt.
It's still not that bad when you think about how I would think it would be even less.
Yeah, bow hunting is you're on a rifle hunt a couple hundred yards away, you can drill that elk, especially an elk. I mean, they have a giant kill zone. So, yeah, I'll be doing that. And then I'll go on probably sometime in November, go back to Nebraska and do a whitetail hunt, bow hunt. So a lot of fun.
It. You've got an interesting coffee thing you do. Are you still doing that? Getting off the caffeine in intermittent intervals to change up your...
Yes, so I do. And
you're like an experimenter.
So what I do is, and the funny thing is, caffeine really affects me. I can have 2 shots of espresso at 8 in the morning or 6 in the morning, doesn't matter. And that caffeine is in me and it keeps me rolling till at least 7 p.m. And as I get more and more used to it, it might be 3 shots, maybe, depending on, how tired I am. But every so often, either twice a year or once a quarter. So either twice a year or 4 times a year, I will wean myself off of caffeine completely for at least a week. And I'll do a step down. So for a week, I'll have 1 shot, and then the next week I'll have decaf, and the next week I'll have none. And the beauty of this is that it like resets your baseline. So the next week after that, I can have 1 shot of espresso in the morning or 1 small coffee, and I'm just rolling all day. So, and they say, I don't get it tested, but they say it helps with adrenal fatigue and things like that.
Sure. Well, former job, you got to look out for that kind of stuff. All those adrenaline dumps overseas, that beats the adrenal system up.
Well, and I lost a kidney, and I think the adrenal glands are on the kidney, right? And I don't know if I lost one of my adrenal glands or not. So maybe I should find out.
Was that from a combat related injury?
That was not combat related. No.
Something that cool, was like snowboarding, skiing.
It's
mountain biking, windsurfing.
I lost it in the Navy, but I was misdiagnosed. So when I was in the Navy, I was misdiagnosed with IBS, with constipation. That's what they called it. And I was like, I'm pretty sure, that's not what it was, a kidney stone. So
wow.
Because my belly was distended and my kidney wasn't draining correctly. And they're like,
was that the end of your career? Or did you continue after that?
So this happened first time in the Navy back in 98.
Oh, geez.
I actually had, it happened in boot camp. It happened once in BUDS. It happened in Hell Week. I had a kidney stone in Hell Week. So these are like two of the worst things pain-wise I think a human can do. They say childbirth is pretty rough, and I can't attest to that. I can imagine it's pretty rough, but I think Wednesday night of Hell Week I started to get this pain, which I later found out was kidney stone, and it just wouldn't pass. And then finally it did. I had it happen to me in sniper school. So I spent one night in sniper school, I spent in a hospital, and they were like, well, we can't figure out what's wrong with you. We think it's IBS because my stomach was pushed out. And what was happening was a kidney stone was getting stuck in my ureter, and it wasn't draining, and my kidney would swell up, and it kind of hurt. And
sounds horrible.
Well, I finally lost, and then I did one deployment. And then right before my second deployment, they finally correctly diagnosed me. And I had actually
nobody ever did a scan of you when you were in the hospital. They were just.
Well, I was in a workup for my second deployment. I went to a doctor's clinic, a doctor's office, a non-military doctor office outside of Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, because we were down there training. And actually a good friend of mine, his dad was the doctor there. And for the first time I got an x-ray with contrast. And they're like, oh my gosh, it's a kidney stone and your kidney's about to blow up, because it was blocking my kidney. So they went in and I think it's called a lithotripsy, where they sound wave it and then you get rid of it. And then I got another stone, or my kidney just wasn't draining now because it was ruined from, a long time of not working. And ultimately it led to me, they went in to fix it. They were going to go in and try to fix it. And they had to remove it because there was nothing there to fix. So
pretty cool that you were able to continue on this illustrious career. I know you only need one kidney, but you think a lot of times in that position, they tell you your time to go.
Well, I was kicked out of the Navy right away. Oh. And I signed a waiver to stay in the military. And then, so that was 2002. And then I did 5 more deployments until the Bureau of Navy Medicine realized that I was still deploying. And they found out when I got a Purple Heart. So they have to. So I don't think I actually.
You're not fit for combat. Get a Purple Heart.
Yeah, well, it took them that long to find out. So they found out in 2009, and they said, "Hey, you can't deploy. Have you been deploying?" I'm like, "Well, yeah." And they said, well, this is right after I climbed Denali. They're like, you're not fit for duty. And I was like, I just climbed Denali. I think I'm fit to go do a deployment. And they're like, nope. So I went and they said, you have to take a desk job. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. If I can't do my job, you have to medically retire me. So they did a med board. I got a partial medical retirement, not a full medical. And then I went, this is just how dumb I was. I went 10 years, Mickey, without a real rating from the VA, the Veterans Administration. And just this year, I went in and started in February. And I worked with a group here locally that helps you push your paperwork through the VA, because that's obviously kind of a nut roll. And I resubmitted my paperwork, or I signed a power of attorney for them to do it. And they went through this whole thing. For any veterans listening, it's called DAV, Disabled American Veterans. And they crushed it. They did all my paperwork for me. Like literally April, they came back and they said, hey, you're 100% disabled by the VA. And, it helps a lot. So
that's awesome. Not awesome that you're 100% disabled, but awesome that you're getting what you're supposed to be.
Yeah, it was cool. I'm such an idiot for not actually having done that. I don't know.
No, it doesn't make you an idiot. It makes you busy raising a family and pretending to be an elk hunter.
Yeah. Fledgling. I'm an elk hiker.
Thinking about making a bow again. I haven't made a bow in a long time. I was up last night. I couldn't sleep watching YouTube videos of a dude making self bows out in the woods. Oh. And I've got an Osage tree near me. I think I'm going to go find a staff on there. And I haven't made a bow since I was in my early 20s. I think I'm going to make one.
I think I dabbled in not making bows, but I did hunt with a longbow for a little bit. And I'm on a compound bow now just because I don't have the time. I think if I had
I've never owned a compound.
If I had the time, I much prefer just shooting a recurve or a longbow, just kind of the art of it all. But if you're going to be accurate out to 40, 50 yards, you'd have to shoot that thing every day a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't have that kind of time right now. I'm lucky to get, in the summer, 2 to 3 days a week on my bow, just shooting a few, maybe a few dozen arrows. And if I haven't picked up my compound bow in a week, it's so dialed in. Of course, I would love to shoot it every day, but that's not a reality for me.
Yeah, it's kind of like picking a carbine up or something. You throw a mag in it and you go.
Yeah, it's got the sights, it's got the things, and I feel comfortable shooting wild game out to 50 yards with broadheads with my compound bow, even if I haven't shot it, within a week. Of course, I'll do a tune-up and make sure everything's good to go. But, if you haven't picked up your stick bow for a week, you're not going to go hunting. Like you just,
I think that's kind of like if Michael Jordan gets on the court, he's going to make some shots.
For sure, but not at the same.
Michael Jordan with a bow,
but not at the same level as he did when he was training frequently.
Sure, I used to shoot every night. I had a range in the basement that I could get like 25 yards, and wow. I would hang bottle caps on strings. Yeah, and just sit there and shoot bottle caps. I haven't done that in over a decade. I tried it this summer. I couldn't hit bottle caps anymore. I couldn't hit bottle caps. I had a friend with a recurve growing up. His name's Tom. He pheasant hunt.
Yeah.
He shot pheasants on the wing. It was awesome.
Whoa,
yeah, it was cool. Way. Yeah, he was good.
I shot a couple of grouse this year elk hunting with my bow, but they were on the ground.
On the ground.
Yeah.
Which is still cool.
Hey, man. I shot them, right? I've shot turkey with my bow on the ground.
Did you retrieve the feathers from those grouse? Were you able to, I'm not the feathers, the arrows, or did they bury in the forest floor?
That's
an expensive grouse.
It is. Here's the thing. A friend of mine, his brother, shot a carbon arrow with his compound that he didn't know it was cracked. and it cracked when he let go of the string, and half of the shaft went through his arm.
I was about to say,
yeah. So
horrible.
If I miss a target, or
okay,
if
you pitch him,
that arrow is dead. That if it hits the ground, or if I kill an animal with it, that arrow to me is, they're like $70, for, I don't know, 6 of them or whatever, but it's not worth shoving, the half of a carbon arrow through your wrist.
Damn.
Like, yeah.
I've seen pictures of that. I've never seen it happen, but I've seen pictures. I shoot wood arrows, and that can happen with wood arrows a little bit, but.
What kind of bow do you shoot?
I've got a longbow and a recurve.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about the same kind of poundage either.
Yeah. Well,
65 pounds. You're probably dealing with like 90.
I have a 70-pound compound bow. It's nothing. My longbow is like 65, and I'm probably, again, my favorite would be just to get a recurve and hunt with that, but maybe when I have the time. So
when's that going to happen? You're climbing mountains and running training.
Yeah. I did used to shoot in the garage quite a bit, and that's the beauty of
till you put a round into the washing machine.
I did put a round through a door once.
Did you?
Yeah.
That's
no one was behind it. Not a bullet, by the way.
Pictures.
Not a bullet.
An arrow.
An arrow.
Know what you meant. I said round by mistake, an arrow.
Yeah.
So I ask people this from time to time as we're wrapping up a podcast.
Yep.
If the people listening never got to meet you again or see you or hear you, what would you leave them with?
Oh. If they never got to see me again.
If this was the only time you'd ever pass their way, what would you pass on to the folks listening and viewing?
Man, I would have prepped for that one, Mickey.
I asked that on purpose.
No, I would say this. It could be shooting a gun. It could be shooting a bow. It could be, being a husband, being a father, being American, whatever it is, whatever your endeavor, whatever your pursuit. I think too often we get kind of like wrapped around, or we try to do too much or try to be too high speed. And really, to me, it comes down to the best do the basics better. And that's, I've heard that, with firearms training. I've heard that with archery. I've heard that with fitness. Like so many people are like, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to do some crazy workout of the day with burpees and sprints and muscle ups and we're talking about a person who can't do 10 pull-ups and 20 push-ups, right? Or can't do a body weight deadlift or a double body weight deadlift. So figure out what the basics are and get really good at the basics. And, then once in a while, do something slightly more advanced and, always go back to them basics. And I think I'm guilty of it, with my own training. I'm like working on some new drill or whatever. And I'm like, oh man, I really just need to spend some time on, sight and squeeze today, or I need to spend some time on just clearing the garment and getting a good draw or whatever it might be. But identify them basics and just go deep on them. And then once in a while, do something advanced, and you'll see that the principles learned in doing them basics will take you a long way, right? Whether it's your marriage, your kids. I have 4 kids. So to me, I feel better when hey, the basics are, we're going to eat as a family tonight. We're going to have some time together as a family. And then we're going to say our prayers before bed, make sure you brush your teeth. These are very basic things. And
good stuff.
And so many people are like, well, they're talking about fancy vacations and this, that, and the other. And that's the frosting, right? Or that's the icing. So that's what I would say.
I dig it. I think we do get too busy sometimes thinking about all the things we could or would or want to do, and all the while life
We want to
passing
be
by.
we want to be high speed.
Not all of us can be high speed. That's true. That's very true. I dig it, man. I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate your continued service, working with NRA and proliferating that organization, which I know people have a mixed feeling about them now. And I still tell anybody that'll listen, that's the number one group of people in this country continuing to proliferate our firearm rights today. And if they don't believe it, they need to look at the history.
You know what? No organization is perfect. Certainly no nonprofit is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly the NRA isn't perfect. But you're carrying a gun today. If you do choose to do that, you have a gun and the right to carry it because of the NRA. And I've told this to Wayne, I've told this to others. I'm very appreciative of what they've done to protect my right to keep and bear arms while I was in the military, and super privileged now to be a part of that. Because
of NRA, its members, their donations, people, we the people thing. It is the number one private organization made up of citizens affecting the laws of the land.
Yep. Absolutely.
I can't say that enough to people. So I appreciate you, man. If you need anything, you know how to get a hold of me. And I wish you the best. And it's always good to see and chat with you. And I hope that you have good success on that elk hunt.
I'll keep you posted.
Cool, man.
Yeah, buddy. Well. You too. Thanks, Mickey.
Thanks. Visit our website, CarryTrainer.com, for information about classes held throughout the U.S., CarryTrainer apparel, and upcoming projects. You can also email us at training@CarryTrainer.com for information about setting up your own private course or speaking engagement. Training@CarryTrainer.com or CarryTrainer.com.